Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Explore Spiritism program on Kardec Radio. In this program, I share teachings, resources, and reflections to help you along your way in your exploration of Spiritism. So, not last week, but the week before, my husband and I sat down for our Gospel at Home meeting. And when we opened the chapter at random in the particular book we were using, we looked at the title, and as not uncommon, we looked at each other like, seriously? With a kind of smile of amusement at the coincidence of the chapter title. So I was actually planning on telling you about that tonight and then sharing that text with you with some reflections on it. But I realized that some people watching might not even know what the Gospel at Home meeting is all about. So given that this is Explore Spiritism after all, I decided that tonight we'd back up one step and I'll instead explain the Gospel at Home meeting. And then in the next episode, I will share that reading with you from a particular Gospel at Home meeting that he and I had. Okay. The common practice among Spiritists referred to as the Gospel at Home, and I'm going to share my screen with you here. This practice is one in which we set aside a particular day and time each week to gather as members of a family, a household, or otherwise close-knit circle in order to read and reflect together on some morally edifying lessons. This is not a ritual or some kind of required practice. There's no Spiritist rule stating that you have to do this. It's simply developed into something that has become a highly recommended and widely utilized activity for spiritual nourishment, and for good reasons. The readings themselves may come from any one of a variety of texts, but should inevitably focus on the gospel-related themes and guidance. The Gospel according to Spiritism is a prime resource, but some examples of complementary books that Spiritists may also use are ones like these, right? These are just some examples. Now, a truly worthwhile and most fruitful investment in this time together extends beyond simply reading the text to actually go on to then have conversation about it. Even better, to have some back and forth dialogue going on about the application of the lesson to whatever is going on in the participants' lives at that time. For parents with children at home, for example, this is a great opportunity for them to exercise their duty as parents to help children think about what maybe they have witnessed or they are experiencing themselves, and learn how to analyze that through the application of the Spiritist principles, which will provide countless benefits for them, not only at whatever stage they're in, but also later in life. The activity, however, is not just for homes with children. It's something recommended for all of us. As for how the meeting typically goes, in addition to a prayer made by one of the participants to start the meeting and facilitate the mental connection among those present, followed by the reading of the Spiritist text and subsequent dialogue, another component of the Gospel at Home practice among Spiritists is to set out, prior to the start of the meeting, a jar of water and some glasses, or a glass of water for each person. This is because as Spiritists, we believe not only in the presence of spiritual benefactors alongside us as we conduct this meeting, but also in the compassionate work of those spirits to magnetize that water. Or in other words, infuse the water with components of a restorative nature that are supportive to the energetic balance and health of our spiritual bodies. and by consequence our physical bodies, both of which suffer day to day from the harmful influence of any imbalanced thoughts that we may have, right, that may surface as we manage our way through the stress and challenges of daily life. And then on conclusion of the reading and reflections, the meeting is ended with a closing prayer to give thanks for the benefits received and the assistance of good spirits, as well as to ask for heavenly assistance for friends and loved ones, and for those in need and those who may be suffering. What I want to focus on tonight is why this practice is so beneficial, so highly recommended. And let me start by saying that our homes are truly something that we should treat with great value, something we should hold rather sacred, to be quite honest. Our homes represent a space that we can call our own relative to the outside world. And we alone, meaning those who share a home, generate the environment within it. This is something that we can use to our benefit. Of course, it means we can decorate the space to make it one that we feel comfortable in and even find joy. But also, and more importantly, we can positively impact the environment in its spiritual aspects, meaning the kind of energy that circulates around the home, driven by the behavior of its inhabitants and the impacts that those behaviors have, the mental atmosphere or the collectivity of thoughts that we immerse ourselves in and that we contribute to when we're there, and the overall degree of harmony derived from them both. The home is also a space that unites spirits who find themselves together under the same roof, most typically in the form of a family. And as we learn from Spiritism, through the process of reincarnation, the family plays a very important role in affording the educational and practical opportunities that we need for our moral evolution. It's never by chance that we are born into or that life brings us into the families that we find ourselves in. Quite typically, in fact, those who find themselves together in a family are souls reunited. In other words, souls who have a history of relationships with one another through former lifetimes in the physical plane. And these souls come together to continue their individual and collective journeys of spiritual evolution. Now, the evolutionary needs of the family members, their incarnatory goals in a given physical existence, will vary person to person and family to family. They may come together to iron out past mistakes, as we often do, and repair broken relationships. Or they may come together to help one another or help some particular member of the family, or to collaborate in a particular task or tasks that they committed to before rebirth. And it may be some combination of these, or a different reason altogether. Regardless, the spirits who come together as a family are always there to learn, one way or another, how to love or to exercise love. And for any souls in the form of a family, or we could even, for this topic, broaden this now to include the members of any shared household, the very sharing of a home is an invitation in itself, as it affords the circumstances needed for us to develop, through practice and effort, our skills, so to speak, in fraternity, solidarity, forgiveness, compassion, sacrifice, patience, etc. Life on earth for the incarnate soul is a school, and the home is a classroom of primary importance, simply by the very nature of the characteristics I've already mentioned. When asked, what is the best school for preparing reincarnated souls on earth the Spirit Emmanuel answered that it is the home where individuals should receive an educational foundation in the areas sentiment and character. He says, educational establishments in the world can instruct, but only the Family Institute can educate. That it is for this reason that the university can develop the citizen, but only the home can edify the human being. So, having established that, why should we go through all of the practical and moral exercises inherent to being part of a family or other similar unit, living under one roof? Not to mention even when we no longer live under the same roof, when it comes to those most important relationships. Why should we go through all these moral exercises without acquiring or developing the understanding of how to complete those exercises successfully? With all the situations in life that test us morally, how can we expect to pass those tests if we don't study and prepare for them? Well, we shouldn't, and we don't have to. Which takes us back to the reason or the objective for the practice of the gospel at home. In the same text that I just referenced, Emmanuel goes on to say, in its magnificent task of fostering the moral values taught by Christ, the edification of men and women is the objective of Spiritism in its emphasis on the lessons of the gospel. In other words, Spiritism serves to illuminate mankind's conscience in such a way that the home is restored, thus translating to a new cycle of spiritual progress. Now, what does Emmanuel mean by the restoration of the home? In part, it's about positively influencing all of this, which has everything to do with the quality of our thoughts and our behaviors. Generally speaking, our behaviors within the home, as well as more specifically our behaviors toward one another. And of course, our behaviors ultimately originate where? Our thoughts. The Spirit Joan of Angeles, for example, in the book Happy Life, advises us, cleanse your organism with positive thoughts. The power of the mind over the emotions, the body, and the entire physiological machinery is incontestable. Many infirmities originate in mental idleness, depression, rebelliousness, or self-destructive thoughts. Channel your thinking toward pleasant, wholesome, and optimistic ideas. You will benefit from it, enjoying a well-being that will radiate outward to others, bringing about peace. Imagine now if everyone in the home would spend some time conscientiously engaging in this kind of mental hygiene and refocusing thoughts that may have strayed in unhealthy directions. The contributions of the gospel at home meeting toward the restoration, we might even also say maintenance of the home, also has to do with offering the resources to prepare us for the practical exercises and tests in these areas. Again, in Happy Life, though in a different lesson, our friend Joanna talks about the importance of setting aside time for moments of reflection. And I think that she says something we can surely all appreciate, which is that those who do not meditate lose touch with themselves, bound to the hands of the clock, either way ahead of time or far behind. People get overwhelmed and lose direction. Sound familiar? She goes on to say that success demands periodic reassessment of one's goals and actions And let's consider this periodic reassessment and our actions in the context of our moral goals. Reflection, she says, allows you to identify mistakes and correct them in time to reformulate or rethink your responsibilities and renew yourself more easily. Well, at this point, you might be thinking, well, this is all logical and good. What's the big deal about having to do this together in a group, right? Nowadays, our lives are so busy that it's often no easy task to get everyone together at the same time. And why the same day and time every week? Let's go through the second question first. For one thing, some family members, generally speaking, may spend more time throughout the week in spiritual reflection than others. Some, maybe much less, perhaps even very little beyond this once per week commitment. So establishing the same day and time each week takes care of the logistics, right? Everybody knows where they need to be and when they can prepare for it. And it assures that everyone in the home has at least this moment dedicated to an elevation of thought and a nourishment of the soul, which ultimately benefits everyone. Further, a regular time commitment like this enables the presence of specific mentoring spirits who can then likewise dedicate themselves. Because just like us, they have their own activities. So they can dedicate themselves to becoming part of this weekly gathering on a regular basis, and therefore establish and develop, as time goes on, a relationship with the group as a whole. And this will only strengthen their ability to assist us, not only during the meeting itself, but in the time spent throughout the week outside of the meeting. Now, why the importance of doing this together as a family or household? And by the way, a little pause here just to say that if you live alone, please don't worry, right? The practice of the gospel at home is not just for people who live in groups, and you too will benefit in similar ways from this dedicated time for this kind of reflection and connection to the spirit realm. It's just that for those who do live together in groups and a family, the benefits of making this kind of commitment are worth the effort. And I'm going to explain why tonight. So recall, if you will, the quote read earlier from Joanna de Angelis, in which she says that we benefit from moments of reflection, quote, enjoying a well-being that will radiate outward toward others, bringing about peace. Imagine the synergistic effect of having everyone in the home united simultaneously in this elevation of thought, radiating outward a similar state of well-being. If the participants are focused and engaged, the resulting attunement at a higher wavelength can afford opportunities that may not otherwise arise as we go about our weekly activities. You know, with each of us on a different rhythm and with different vibratory patterns, even throughout a single day. So, for example, this connection may foster dialogue that wouldn't normally come up. It may encourage participants to open up about some kind of personal struggle and within the safe space receive loving support. Doors of comprehension can open, affording family members a better understanding of one another. An exchange of ideas can lead to a collaborative problem solving, exposure to different perspectives on a situation. And finally, let's not forget that at the base of all this is the opportunity for moral education inspired by the teachings of Jesus, offering inspiration and motivation to make the small sacrifices that though they require effort, in the end make a big difference in the home. So to illustrate, Emmanuel says, for example, that when the teachings of the Master vibrate within the walls of the domestic temple, the small sacrifices made by the inhabitants weave a shared happiness. So thoughtless comments are heard without reactions of revolt. Slander is muffled in the cotton of silence. The errors of others are treated with calm, and suggestions of a harmful nature don't find openings for their intrusion. Adding to all the above, we have the fact that we are engaging in this joint study and reflection under the beneficial influence of the spiritual mentors that are present among the group. And we can't underestimate their ability to guide us in our thoughts, in our intuitive insights, in our advice to one another, and sometimes even in the selection of readings. It's also worth noting that this healthy radiation of thought and energy from everyone present will also support the work of the spiritual benefactors when they go to magnetize the water that we've left out at the start of the meeting. So, my friends, the Gospel at Home meeting, rather than being, as some might think at first impression, some kind of ordained or mandated practice, is instead one of the key tools available to us that we have at our disposal as we seek to grow spiritually and improve the quality of our lives, which is what makes it so important. Now, for some of these concepts that I mentioned as part of this discussion, you might want to explore them a little further. So as your tour guide in the exploration of Spiritism, I want to share some resources for you to do that. I'll show you here for a moment what they are, and then I'll also put the relevant links in the comments to this video on Facebook. The first one is a section on the Explore Spiritism website that's actually devoted to this very specific topic of the Gospel at Home. And there you can read about its benefits, general guidelines, basic procedures, and you can even read more about the fluidic therapy, which is a reference to the magnetization of the water that I mentioned. Okay? As for books, there's a Spiritist book by Joanna the Angelus that is devoted specifically to the topic of family, called Family Constellation. It's very good, and I highly recommend it. Then in the Spirits book, we have certain questions and answers within different contexts that somehow address aspects of family life, right? So if you have this book, you can check out the numbers, the question and answer numbers that I've included there. And then there's the Gospel According to Spiritism, which we not only use in this meeting, but has a lot of text. In fact, really, the entire book, almost every single chapter, is somehow related to the topic of family, or has some correspondent nature to our experiences as being part of a family. But there is one particular chapter called Honor Your Father and Mother, which has some topics that are particularly focused on family relationships. And finally, if you want to check out some videos, I'm suggesting a few here. One is a short but very inspirational video called Family and Learning in a Changing Society. It's on the channel for the Spiritist Federation of Florida. And then there's one that's longer but very educational. There's a lot of information. It's called Family Members Reincarnate Together, and that's on the channel Spiritism, hosted by Brian Foster, who also has a program here on Kardec Radio. And for a different dynamic of video, there's a recording of what was a live conversation among Spiritist friends as part of the Spiritist Conversations show or program hosted by Dennis Cece, and this episode is called How Did I End Up in This Family? So it's another good one, and it's on the Spiritist Conversations YouTube channel. That's it for tonight in terms of what I'm going to cover on this topic. I want to really thank you all for joining, and I want to wish you all a great next couple of weeks. And I will leave you now with just a few more encouraging words from our friend Joanna De Angelis, where this loving benefactor writes, "At least once a week, gather your family and bring joy into the home through the joint study of Spiritism, creating and maintaining this practice so that the Master's guidelines for life become an efficient route of love to wisdom in your home." Have a great night, folks. Thank you so much, and God bless.